When people talk about ancient civilizations, most fade into memory ruins in the desert, forgotten kingdoms swallowed by time. But Egypt is different. Egypt still raises questions, still inspires theories, still challenges what we think we know about human progress. And that's the problem that continues to puzzle historians, scientists, and even modern world leaders. How did one ancient civilization gain so much power, so much knowledge, and leave behind mysteries we still cannot fully explain? How did they build monuments that have survived earthquakes, invasions, and thousands of years of harsh desert? Why did their religion, mathematics, architecture, and statecraft survive longer than almost any other civilization on Earth? And most importantly, what did the Egyptians understand about power that the rest of the ancient world didn't? These questions show why Egypt isn't just history, it as a blueprint for how human knowledge began. And in this video, we're going to unpack all of it: the hidden systems, the political design, the scientific breakthroughs, the economic genius, the religious psychology, everything that made Egypt one of the most influential civilizations in human history. So let's start. To understand Egypt's power, you have to begin with something very simple, but extremely rare in the ancient world: geographical luck. Egypt existed because of one river, the Nile. But it wasn't just any river. The Nile flooded with incredible reliability. Every year, at almost the same time, the river overflowed, spread nutrient-rich silt, and created some of the most fertile land on Earth. While the rest of the world starved or fought unpredictable climate patterns, Egypt could plan ahead. They could store food, grow surplus crops, and feed workers who didn't need to be farmers anymore. This stability created something the ancient world almost never had: time. Time for thinking, time for experimenting, time for building. Societies don't produce philosophy or advanced architecture when they're constantly fighting to survive. Egypt didn't have that problem. And so the Egyptians developed something extraordinary for their time: a centralized, stable government. At the center of this government was the pharaoh, a unique invention in ancient statecraft. Other civilizations had kings. Egypt created something beyond a king: a living god. The pharaoh wasn't just a ruler, he was a bridge between the human world and the divine. And that political idea changed everything. If the leader is a god, then obeying him isn't just loyalty, it's cosmic duty. And building projects aren't just construction, they're acts of worship. That's why Egyptians could mobilize tens of thousands of workers, maintain order for centuries, and build monuments that looked impossible to other cultures. But political power alone didn't make Egypt exceptional. Their civilization was a scientific machine. Egyptians mastered mathematics, early geometry, decimal systems, fractions. They weren't doing math for fun, they needed it. The Nile's flood changed farmland boundaries every year, so the state needed surveyors, scribes, and administrators who could measure land precisely. In solving those problems, they unintentionally trained generations of mathematicians. Egypt was also a pioneer in medicine. Their medical papyri described surgical techniques, bone setting, dentistry, even early forms of prosthetics. Many civilizations believed illness was purely supernatural. The Egyptians believed illness had physical causes. They didn't abandon religion, but they mixed spiritual belief with scientific observation, something that made their medicine surprisingly modern. And of course, there's architecture. The pyramids, the temples, the obelisk structures built so precisely that even today engineers debate how they achieved it. But the real secret wasn't alien technology or mysterious powers. It was something far more impressive: organization. Egypt mastered logistics, labor management, long-distance quarrying, and stone transportation. They understood leverage, ramps, angles, the strength of materials. And they kept records of everything. One reason we know so much about Egypt is because Egyptians were obsessed with writing. Their writing system, hieroglyphics, wasn't just a tool for communication. It was a tool for state control, taxes, laws, religious texts, medical knowledge, engineering instructions. All of it was written, stored, and passed across generations. Most ancient civilizations lost knowledge with every war or disaster. Egypt preserved it. But Egypt's real power was psychological. Their religion wasn't chaotic like many ancient mythologies. It was ordered, structured, and deeply connected to the natural world. The sun rose every day. The Nile flooded every year. Life had cycles. Death had meaning. This belief system created a society that valued stability over chaos. And that stability made Egypt almost impossible to conquer for centuries. Their religious worldview also produced something else, a civilization built around legacy. Egyptians believed in the afterlife so profoundly that they engineered their entire society to preserve bodies, memories, and monuments. This forced them to develop advanced chemistry for mummification, complex tomb engineering to protect bodies, and a monumental architectural tradition that shaped global culture for thousands of years. And while the rest of the world changed rapidly, Egypt remained surprisingly consistent. For nearly 3,000 years longer than any modern nation-state, Egypt kept the same cultural identity, the same artistic style, the same religious structure, the same political symbolism. That cultural continuity allowed innovations to accumulate instead of disappearing. But of course, the story of Egypt isn't just about success. Their power eventually began to weaken. Their system became rigid. Their religious institutions became too controlling. Their isolation, once a strength, turned into a vulnerability. As new empires rose, Persia, Greece, Rome, Egypt struggled to adapt. And that brings us to another major question. How did Egypt finally fall? What caused one of history's strongest civilizations to lose control of its own destiny? Egypt's decline wasn't sudden, and it wasn't due to a single invasion. It was a slow unraveling, a combination of internal weakness and external pressure. Over centuries, the central authority of the pharaoh weakened. Nobles and priests gained more influence, often challenging royal decrees. Egypt's rigid social hierarchy, once a source of stability, became a bottleneck for innovation. When floods failed or crops were poor, social unrest grew. The same Nile that had built Egypt could no longer guarantee abundance. And as foreign powers expanded, Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, the Egyptians found themselves unable to defend against the superior military technologies of outsiders. Each conquest left Egypt politically weaker, even if culturally it remained resilient. Even so, Egypt's knowledge and ideas never truly disappeared. When Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 330 BCE, he didn't destroy it. Instead, he embraced it, founding Alexandria as a new center of learning. The famous Library of Alexandria became a hub for scholars from across the known world. Egyptian texts on mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and architecture were studied, translated, and incorporated into Greek knowledge systems. Without Egypt, the scientific and philosophical advancements of the classical world would have looked very different. The Egyptians had not just accumulated knowledge, they had created a foundation upon which entire civilizations could build. Religion, too, survived long past Egypt's political decline. Greek and Roman rulers adopted Egyptian gods, symbols, and religious practices. Isis and Osiris became familiar figures throughout the Mediterranean. Cleopatra herself, the last pharaoh, ruled as a Greek-Egyptian monarch, blending the ancient Egyptian tradition with the Hellenistic world. Egyptian art, symbolism, and architecture influenced Rome and later European civilizations, leaving a legacy that extended thousands of years beyond the end of the pharaohs. The scientific contributions of Egypt are perhaps less obvious, but no less critical. Their observations of the stars allowed them to create the calendar we use today in a basic form. They tracked the lunar and solar cycles, predicted the Nile floods, and developed techniques in surveying, engineering, and urban planning that remain astonishing for their accuracy. Their understanding of the human body, evidenced in mummification, surgery, and medical texts, laid early foundations for modern medicine. In their mathematical innovations, fractions, geometry, and practical arithmetic enabled construction projects that still inspire modern engineers. Yet, what makes Egypt truly remarkable isn't just the knowledge they created. It is how they integrated knowledge into every aspect of power and society. Politics, religion, science, art, and architecture weren't separate domains. They were interconnected. A pharaoh's legitimacy depended on knowledge, military strategies, religious rituals, economic planning, and even medical care. To govern effectively, Egypt had to be a civilization of thinkers as well as doers. Every pyramid, every temple, every tomb reflected this fusion of intellect, belief, and political authority. This integration also gave Egypt a kind of psychological advantage over both its own population and its enemies. Egyptians didn't just build monuments, they created a narrative of eternal power. Their art and writing projected order, stability, and divine authority. To conquer Egypt was to conquer not just armies, but a deeply ingrained belief system. That is why, for centuries, foreign powers ruled Egypt as much through adoption of Egyptian rituals as by military might. Control over the Nile Valley required understanding the culture as much as dominating the land. Even today, the influence of Egypt continues. Modern archaeology, astronomy, medicine, and mathematics all trace aspects of their knowledge to Egyptian beginnings. The pyramids inspire engineers and architects. Egyptian hieroglyphs inform linguists and historians. Their centralized administrative techniques inspire studies in governance. Their cultural continuity shows what human societies can achieve when knowledge, belief, and organization align. Perhaps most importantly, Egypt demonstrates that the power of an idea's stability, divine authority, and preservation of knowledge can outlast armies and empires. So why study Egypt today? Because understanding how they combine geography, religion, politics, and science to sustain power for thousands of years teaches us timeless lessons about civilization. It shows how human ingenuity can harness nature, create enduring systems, and leave a legacy far greater than military conquest alone. It reminds us that civilizations are built not only on material wealth, but on the organization of knowledge, the maintenance of cultural identity, and the vision to project authority across generations. The legacy of ancient Egypt is perhaps best summarized in its most iconic monuments. The Great Pyramid of Giza wasn't just a tomb, it was a statement of precision engineering, administrative genius, and religious devotion. The temples of Luxor and Karnak weren't just places of worship, they were centers of learning, centers of power, and symbols of societal cohesion. And the writings preserved on papyrus weren't just historical records, they were tools to control society, teach morality, and convey knowledge to future generations. Egypt may no longer dominate the political map of the world, but its intellectual empire continues to influence us. Every time we build, govern, measure, or write, we inherit lessons that were first refined along the Nile. Its secrets are not lost, they are embedded in mathematics, architecture, medicine, governance, and the very way humans understand knowledge itself. Ancient Egypt proves that true power doesn't always come from swords or armies. It comes from mastering the environment, organizing society, and passing knowledge forward. In the end, the story of ancient Egypt is not just the story of a civilization, it's a story about human potential. It's about how a society could transform a river into an empire, how belief could become law, how knowledge could become power, and how ideas could outlast kingdoms. From the first pharaohs to the scholars of Alexandria, Egypt taught the world how to preserve memory, harness knowledge, and shape the course of human history. And that is the ultimate secret of ancient Egypt, a civilization that didn't just build monuments or amass wealth, but built the foundations of human knowledge and power that still guide the world today.